the DCCA board have prepared to start the questioning, but then again, we'll go to questions from the audience based on what's in the chat to the extent time allows, and I'll ask the questions. We ask that the questions be focused to the slate of ANC candidates in general. ANC, the opening and closing statements will be by SMD, a single member district. And when we ask questions, we'll have one candidate for an SMD, a specific SMD to follow their competitor, just so, again, folks in that SMD can compare the alternatives they have to vote for. One of our board members will be keeping time. The candidates will hear a single bell ring when there's 10 seconds to go till the end of their time, and then a continuous bell ring when their time is up. As I somewhat tongue-in-cheek said to the candidates, I am not Chris Wallace, so I will, if need be, cut off candidates, and we have the capacity to mute them if need be. But I'm sure with this group, that's not going to be necessary. Last but not least, just so you know, we are going to be recording this. So the goal is to then put this on YouTube at some point, and it'll be available to the community as well. And also in the chat, we're going to be putting a link to a map, an SMD map. So in case you don't know which SMD you're in, you can easily find that. So with that, no further ado, let's start with the introductory comments. We'll start in order with SMD 1, Matthew Sampson. Go ahead.
All right, hi everyone. I've got to set a bar here. I hope to set it very high. Thank you very much to DCCA and to Glenn and Carrie for coordinating this. So in case we haven't met, my name is Matthew Sampson. I am the current commissioner of TUP-B01. So when I first started running, I really wanted to make sure that a climate perspective was represented on ANC 2B. I think that, even though this might seem like a hyper-local position, there is still a lot of things that we can do to make sure that we're fighting climate change here. My role as the commissioner is to represent the values of the community that I live in. And I think that contrary to popular belief that our values do not clash, I think that there is always room for compromise and for consensus to be built. I think that over my first term, I've shown that I can build consensus. I've shown that I can be responsible and respectful with community feedback and input. And when I cast a vote, I'm not just casting it for me, I'm casting it for the people that I represent. I've worked very hard to ensure that pedestrians and bicyclists are safe when they walk through our district. I've also made sure that, we are contributing our part, we're doing our part to contribute to housing goals in the District of Columbia, while at the same time respecting the wishes of our constituents when it comes to historic preservation. And I think that above all, my job here is to build and reach consensus. And I have done that over the first term. And I hope for your vote this year. Thank you very much.
Okay, Meg Rosenstack.
Hi, I'm Meg Rogenstock. Thanks to Glenn and to the DuPont Circle Citizens Association for convening this debate. The ANC is our most local unit of government, and it doesn't have any legal or regulatory power, but what it does have is the power to shape our neighborhood's quality of life and the future of our city. And that power comes from making your voice heard on everything from liquor licenses to pop-up developments, but on things like homelessness and the comprehensive plan for the city as well. From all of these issues, our voice sets the agenda for both the city council and mayor's office. Now, our ANC was once a model for effective citizen engagement. It was vibrant, vocal, and vital. And that's what I want to see again, and that's why I'm running. I've been the voice of underdogs for my entire legal career, working to ensure that they are not overlooked, ignored, or denied a seat at the table when big global corporations set up shop right in their backyard. So my promise to you is that you'll understand opportunities for engagement, and you'll understand how the debate will affect you, and your voice will be heard. I've been your neighbor for 30 years, and I want the same thing that you want. We want a vibrant neighborhood that preserves the best of our past while embracing change for all of our residents. So I hope you'll vote for me, Meg Rogensock, for ANC 2B01. Thank you.
Okay, those were the two candidates in SMD1. Now we're on to SMD2. Daniel Warwick.
Hi, I'm Daniel Warwick. Thank you so much for having me. I miss when we could have these candidate forums at the Chastleton and do it in person. Frankly, I miss when we could have ANC meetings in person as well, and even cups of coffee with our neighbors. But this is how we do things now. I'm really proud of what I've been able to accomplish over the past 6 years as a commissioner on 2B and several of those as chair. And when I think about accomplishments on an ANC, it's kind of hard to speak to specific individual accomplishments because really the goal of what we do is to provide input to the city on discretionary matters that go before boards and commissions. Really the heart of what keeps me excited to serve on the ANC is working with applicants, working with neighbors, trying to get things to make it so we can all work together and come to compromises. I think there's a lot of other things that we do. There are a lot of commissioners who use being on an ANC as a platform for their own individual beliefs, as a platform to gain notoriety across the city. That's not really my style. My style is I try and run a good meeting if I'm chair. I try and bring folks together. I try and find what is the decision point that's being asked for. It's typically not a yes or no. It's typically how does this fit in context of historic preservation, or how does this fit the special exception criteria, and what does the person living next door really want? What will the city policies let them get? And what's the way that we can get a meeting of the minds and have everyone work together? And that's something that I'm still really excited about. And look forward to working with you all over the next 2 years if you'll have me. Things I'm excited for over the next 2 years. I'm excited for the DuPont Circle deck over and streetscape project. We need to get that fully funded. We need to get that under construction. It will be a catalytic change for Connecticut Avenue, which frankly, that retail corridor has seen better days. I'm excited for Stead Park, not West DuPont, but on the ANC, you see the whole neighborhood. I'm excited for what we see from the bid. And I'm excited for the bike and bus lanes coming to DuPont. And I'm excited for all of you. So looking forward to it.
Daniel, thank you. We're adhering to time here. Next we have SMD 3. There are 2 candidates there. Robin Nunn, you're up first.
I'm Robin Nunn, and I'm a Washingtonian running for advisory.
Robin, can you increase your volume? At least I can't hear you very well.
No, it's very low.
I don't know how to increase my volume.
Okay, on your, oh, wait a minute, let me see.
Where would it be? Is it under my select the speaker, select the microphone?
If you try the microphone, because I just tried my microphone. Did I get louder?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay, then just go up. What kind of computer do you have? Do you have
I think if you just move a little closer to the computer because you fluctuated a bit. So if you just want to try that and raise your voice as much as possible, I think you're going to do okay.
Sorry, I think I just hit my video too.
Robin, if you do go under your microphone setting, if you pull that up, go under audio settings, and there is an option to increase the microphone volume.
Okay, I'm there. I'm increasing the microphone volume. Okay,
Okay.
sorry. Well, the one thing I'm going to say, I guess, is that I'm not very technology savvy. But thank you to DCCA and my fellow candidates for not only attending and tonight's forum, but helping me to actually be heard. I hope this will be the first and not the last DuPont ANC Candidates Forum. What I was going to say is that I was born and raised in the Washington area and have lived in DuPont for many years. As a strong believer in community building, I've used my law degree to provide much needed legal representation to low-income residents. I've become well known in the community as a coalition builder, someone who is constantly in search of solutions to systemic problems, and I'm eager to work with others to obtain results. I've been an active member of informal and formal advocacy organizations in DuPont and have been a dedicated member of the DC Bar. I am the candidate for 2B03 that is raised in the Washington area, has been a longtime resident of DuPont, is a member of DuPont Circle Citizens Association's Homelessness Committee, is a board member of the Duke Ellington School of the Arts, is a member of the Economic Enhancement Committee of Historic DuPont Circle Main Streets, is a member of the Safety and Security Committee of the DuPont Circle Business Association, is done tons of activities in the community in terms of being a co-founder of the Ward 2 Women's Alliance, being focused on issues of homelessness in DC and working with the Away Home campaign in the Washington Interfaith Network. I've been a volunteer with numerous organizations, including In Street Village and Charlie's Place. I put in the time and energy and I get results. No interest of this community is too small to merit my attention and sweat. Additionally, I have served as the lead on consumer protection issues, helping hundreds of people better their lives. In the face of the global pandemic, DuPont needs an engaged and results-driven leader to fight on behalf, and I'm that leader.
Thank you, Robin. Next, also running for SMD3, Yosef Bashir. Go ahead, Yosef.
Thank you. Washington has been a home for me since my arrival in the US in 2006. Throughout all that time, I have been preparing for this election. That may not be obvious because my background differs from my fellow candidates. When I was 15 years old, I was shot in the spine for no reason by an Israeli soldier, but I was also saved by many Israeli doctors and nurses. One Israeli shot me, but many Israelis helped me walk again and saved my life. My father inspired me not to let pain, hatred, and conflict define who I was going to be. So I became an advocate for dialogue and understanding, an activist for peace. Here, there, and everywhere I have been, always with one mission, bringing people together. At Northeastern University and then at Brandeis, my education focused on diplomacy and conflict resolution. For more than a decade, I have been an advocate, traveling to 25 states across the US, advocating for dialogue, resolving conflict, and finding equitable solutions to the most troubling disputes. Today, I am a proud citizen of the US and eager to fulfill my public service duty. In 2B03, my neighbors agree on many issues, ranging from sanitation to legal and police protection for transgender neighbors and beyond. Other issues are more divisive. They relate to equal justice, homelessness, affordable housing, and alternative transportation. In regard to all these issues, I will listen, I will take calls, I will read emails, and I will encourage people to speak out at the relevant committees, councils, and hearings. When necessary, I will bring people together for dialogue. And finally, I will act as the voice of the neighborhood, bringing its views to the advisory board and beyond. That is the role I have been preparing for all my life, and I cannot wait to take it on.
Thank you, Yosef. So moving on to SMD4, Mo, would you like to kick it off?
Good evening, everybody, and thank you to all the candidates and all the participants who are here this evening. My name's Moshe, but everybody calls me Mo, so feel free to do so as well. And I'm running for ANC to bring more voices into local government, and that includes those who might not even know what an ANC is. And I've met those people and had a chance to talk to them while running for this seat. And as an ANC commissioner, I view the core of the role as bringing more voices into local government. And that mission is more important than approving liquor licenses or any resolution that we as a commission might pass. I know what it's like not to be heard. When I was a teenager, my family's home was foreclosed. I felt like nobody in government cared, and I want to make sure that nobody in this neighborhood feels that way. I will always be there to listen to you. Professionally, making sure that more voices are heard has been a goal of mine. I've worked at a nonprofit promoting voting rights and improving campaign finance laws. And now I work as a political consultant, having one-on-one conversations to win elections and impact legislation. I came to DC to attend GW, and I quickly fell in love with the city and with Margarita, my fiance. We love DuPont. We want to make this our home forever. And this is just a chance to give back. This is where we want to be, and I view this opportunity very seriously. I want to tackle housing affordability and climate change, making it easier to stay in DuPont, and by bringing back the Transportation Committee, we can make it easier and safer to get around without a car. I know we can work together as neighbors, and I hope to earn your vote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mo. Next, also candidate in SMD4 is Diane Quinn.
Hi, everybody. I'm Diane Quinn, and I want to thank the participants and the DuPont Circles Citizens Association today. I'm really encouraged, by the way, by all the talent that has been shown today and the dedication to want to serve our neighbors. I'm a candidate for ANC 2B04 or 04 because I believe in the power of community voices to shape the community. I believe in building coalitions to address our community concerns, such as housing equity and homelessness, and to plan the future under the new normal. Life is not as it was. I bring management experience from corporate America and DC government. I spent over 10 years as a manager. I worked for DDOT and for the Department of the Department of Recreation and Parks. At Parks and Recreation, I started and initiated the Friends of Recreation program and created 12 non-for-profits for the city in partnership with communities across the city. If you elect me, I commit to protecting the environment, to supporting community businesses, to the safety of ANC 2B04 residents and pedestrians and bikers. To that extent, I'm working on an event on Saturday to clean the bike lanes on 15th Street because they're a safety hazard because we haven't had any of the city cleaning trucks come through. I commit to being open and transparent, to acting ethically, to collaborate, to solve problems, to work effectively with others, and for transparent government. I've lived in this community for over 30 years. I bought my current townhouse as a shell. When I bought it, the only lighting fixtures I had were electrician's test bulbs and my floors were under layman board. The house next to me was used by ladies of the night, so you know how long I've been here. I want to protect what makes this community so fantastic. We have 4 live theaters within walking distance, in addition to all the amenities and restaurants. And I want to build for the future with the residents.
Okay, thank you, Diane. Next, we have SMD05, William Herbig.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me, and thank you to the DuPont Circle Citizens Association for organizing tonight. I'm delighted to be here. I'm delighted to be a candidate for ANC 2B05. I've been a resident of DuPont Circle for about 10 years. Moved in 2010, down at 19th and S. Fell in love with the neighborhood. A lot of issues have become personal as I've gotten to engage in our neighborhood, explore the neighborhood. One of the issues that I feel really passionate about is housing. When we lived in 19th Street, we experienced a flood and were displaced. And as a result of that, we looked around and realized we could not afford to live in our neighborhood anymore. We could no longer live in the neighborhood that we loved. We were forced to leave for a bit. And we fought to find our way back, and we did. And I'm delighted to be in DuPont. It's one of those things where I really realized that DuPont is where the heart is. I'm a professional urban planner, urban designer. I work across the country, and my work focuses mostly on health and social equity issues. While I have the great pleasure of working with communities across the country, one of the things that I desperately miss is actually working on the details that separate great communities from fantastic communities. And so that's why I'm interested in being on the ANC, to really focus on those neighborhood issues that are personal and affect all of us on our day-to-day lives, from liquor license to the externalities associated with nightlife to weeds and tree wells. Some issues are big, some issues are small, all issues are important on a sliding scale.
Hey, Eleanor,
So I'm
can I
delighted.
contact you on a Zoom call?
What's that? I'm sorry.
Keep going, William King.
Sorry. So with that, I'll let it go and I'll turn it over to the other candidates that are running. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you, William. Next up, we have SMD 06, Mike Silverstein.
Thanks, Glenn, and thanks to DCCA for hosting this event. My name is Mike Silverstein. I'm a retired broadcast journalist, 31 years at ABC News. I've served 16 years here on the DuPont Circle ANC. I've lived here in the Lauren condominium for 39 years, and this month, Tom and I celebrated our 39th anniversary. I've been a condo board member. I've served a term as ANC chair. I stepped down as chair when the mayor appointed me to the Alcoholic Beverage Control Board, where I served for 3 terms, and I'm currently spokesperson for the ANC Rainbow Caucus. Right now, the COVID pandemic poses an existential threat to our neighborhood serving small businesses that give the character and life that we have to our neighborhood. We as an ANC and as a community must do everything we can to save them, to keep them afloat until this pandemic comes to an end. And as such, we need to put other things on the back burner, and we need to work together and not fight. The ANC should be the eyes and ears of the DC government. We're to be given great weight on matters as germane, or as mundane rather, as sidewalk cafes. We have to go out there as commissioners and make sure that there's proper pedestrian passageway, that the application is correct. We have to do the same thing with historic preservation, with alcohol licenses. Essentially, that is our statutory demand, the things that we're supposed to do. But we should also be the voice of the neighborhood on larger matters, and we can be a bully pulpit on certain issues where the district is falling short. We can be the conscience of our neighborhood, we can be a bully pulpit, and we can do the mundane work, which is really where we are given the great weight. Because of all that's going on right now, the fighting needs to stop. We need to work together because there's a silent enemy that is killing people and is killing our businesses and is hurting our community. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Mike. The candidate for SMD 07 is a no-show, so let's move on to SMD 08, Matthew Holden.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks to the DCCA for organizing. My name is Matthew Holden, and I'm running to represent Single Member District 2B08. I previously worked at the DC Office of Zoning for 6 years, and I'm currently a geospatial analyst at a transportation planning firm. DuPont Circle is my favorite neighborhood in Washington, DC. I live right on the corner of 17th and U Streets, and I can't imagine living anywhere else. I was moved to run for this position because I want to help make sure that everyone who spends time here feels like they are part of the community. This means people who live here, regardless of whether they rent their home, own their home, or don't currently have a home. This means people who work here or own businesses here. This means people who come to visit friends and family, and people who come to enjoy our local businesses, bars, and restaurants. This means people who use our sidewalks and people who bike on our streets. I believe that the ANC should serve as a productive forum to support all members of our community, and that we should work together to productively solve our problems and engage with the broader district government. As the COVID-19 pandemic continues, we will all have to come up with creative solutions to help each other, and the ANC should be able to work as a cohesive unit to help facilitate the implementation of these solutions. I look forward to meeting more members of our community and learning about everyone's hopes and concerns about the neighborhood. I hope to live up to our current commissioner, Beverly Schwartz's reputation for being a thoughtful and responsive commissioner. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Matthew. And now we're on to SMD 09, Kyle Mulhall. You want to go first? You're on mute, Kyle.
There we go. Thank you very much for inviting me here tonight. I'm Kyle Mulhall. I'm a 37-year resident of DuPont Circle, starting when I was 19 years old and I moved here right out of college. Now I'm a 50-something father of two, still living here my entire adult life in this neighborhood. I care about preserving DuPont Circle's history, its diversity, and its vitality. It's because of the threat from COVID-19 to all of those qualities that I've decided to run for ANC. We're facing an unprecedented risk of years of boarded up storefronts. Our ANC needs to be working hand in hand with our local stores and our shops and restaurants, and also working to protect the most vulnerable residents in our neighborhood. Our ANC needs to build trust with all residents. It should be the place where all neighbors come to solve problems, where every viewpoint is welcomed and respected. That means keeping ANC meetings online. That means putting ANC documents online. That means making sure that there is a monthly newsletter from the ANC. It also means we have to look at our ANC rules and make sure that major actions in the ANC cannot move forward without public comment. Federal government agencies require 30 days of public comment before they can make major moves. We should do the same thing on the ANC to make sure that we're listening to everybody and everybody's voices are being heard. Finally, DuPont Circle is going through a baby boom, a boom in families. I'm contributing to it myself with two toddlers who are 2.5. For nearly 100 years, DCCA has been a leader in preserving the uniqueness of DuPont Circle. Well, our kids will be the ones who are going to have to carry on that legacy into the future. So I think it's very important that our ANC take on education and kids' issues so that we can pass those priorities on to our children with an education and kids committee looking at our school issues and all the issues surrounding Stead Park. Those are the issues that are really motivating me to run, and I thank you very much for inviting me here tonight, and thank you all very much for hosting.
Thank you, Kyle. Ed, do you want to mute yourself? Ed Hanlon's next. Ed, you're still on mute. There you go.
Thank you, Glenn. I'm sorry I was a few minutes late. I guess I was a bit technology challenged by a Windows update. I'm glad to be here. I'm Ed Hanlon. I am the ANC Commissioner for ANC 2B09, and I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. As many of you know, I've lived in the neighborhood for 25 years. I live on Swan Street. Presently, I live with two dogs, Lucky and Rocky. You may have seen them walking around the neighborhood with me. I was elected ANC Commissioner in 2018. I think I bring a unique background to my work as an ANC Commissioner. I have a master's degree in statistics. I'm a trained statistician, as well as a law degree from Georgetown. When I graduated from Georgetown, I could have gone to work for a large law firm. Instead, I chose to do work for the Public Defender's Office. I chose to do that because I had felt a social responsibility to help those who are unrepresented, help those who are marginalized. Over the years, as I developed a law practice, I've represented mostly women with children, many of them facing foreclosure and eviction, the marginalized and the poor. Now, we have many issues that we need to face here in our ANC. Together, we face some of them. We've dealt with the Mason's Temple project and trying to preserve the open green space behind the temple. Together, we've dealt with historic preservation. We are now dealing with 17th Street and how to turn 17th Street into a pedestrian-friendly venue, preserve the streeteries.
10 seconds.
And
10 seconds.
I also am a firm believer in open, transparent, democratic government, and I think this ANC needs to reform. Preserve what's good, but reform. Thank you, and I hope you vote for me in the November election. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Just to the audience, I received a message from our administrator. It's probably best to put your questions into the Q&A function rather than the chat. We've gotten a couple of questions already, but As I said earlier, we'll start with some questions from the DCCA board. And again, candidates, I'll ask you to limit your responses to 1 minute. So the first question is, and this was touched on a little bit by a couple of you already, the ANCs were established to bring government closer to the people and to bring the people closer to government. That presupposes close communication by the ANC with its constituents. There have been concerns raised by residents regarding how transparent ANC 2B has been or hasn't been about its deliberations in the past, and the sudden disbanding of the Transportation and Public Infrastructure Committee, TPI committee, is one example. Could you suggest 1 or 2 specific improvements in how the ANC achieves the objective of bringing the residents closer to government? And specifically, are you in favor of reconstituting the TPI committee? Okay, and the question will be put in the chat room, I think, or the Q&A room. I'm not sure which at this point. So folks that go later in the audience can see that. Let's start with SMD04. Mo, do you want to go? And then Diane, you'll go after Mo.
Sure. Thank you, Glenn. So I absolutely am in favor of reconstituting the TPI committee. I think transportation is one of the issues where ANCs can have such an important impact, but only if the community voices are heard. It's no good to have decisions made by just a few members, even those who are elected by the community. That's not why we're running for office. We're running for office to bring in more voices. So I support having that committee represent people who use a variety of transportation methods. Another thing that I think is important for making sure the ANC remains accessible is to keep those meetings online and make sure that those recordings are promptly posted. I think that meeting minutes are great, but when you really want to know what people are talking about in the neighborhood, having those recordings, as we're doing tonight, is a great way to understand what people are saying, how they're saying it, as we move forward and work together on these issues.
Okay, thanks, Mo. Diane, you want to give us your thoughts? You're on mute. You need to unmute yourself.
First, I was going to say thank you, Mo, because I really do agree with you on this one. I wanted to also say that we need to reinstitute the TPI committee, and we really need to look at the transportation planning that has been done in the past. The last time I looked at some of the planning documents, they are all the way back from 2008. And of course, based on the changing dynamic and living and work patterns today, we really need to analyze and look again at what is it that our community really needs, because there are different forms of transportation, and as many of you have read recently with the downturn in traffic on Metro, many of the plans that we had in the past for transportation just no longer apply. Also, because of the changing dynamic of people moving from the city, we have lots and lots of young folk that are moving back with their parents. This is the highest number of children, college grads moving in with their parents in the nation since the Great Depression. We also need to look at what forms are required by our residents.
Thank you, Diane. So moving in order, next, William Herbig. Can you go, and then we'll go to Mike Silverstein after William.
Sure. You know, one of the things that I didn't mention in my opening statement was I worked for the National Capital Planning Commission a number of years ago. And one of the projects I worked on was our joint HIDAC master plan with the District Office of Planning. And through that process, we did a hybrid approach for community engagement and feedback. And that was both online and in-person sessions. And there was a difference in the types of perspectives and voices that we heard from those that weighed in virtually versus those that attended in person. So I think this pandemic has given us the opportunity to test a lot of online outreach, but we can't get away from those in-person touch points. So as we move forward as an ANC, we need to look at hybrid approaches, reinvent how we engage with our neighbors and citizens so that we make sure that we get both pools of feedback from our neighbors.
Exactly.
Okay, great, thanks. Mike Silverstein?
I think it would be a good idea to reinstate TPI. One good thing about this election is there will be some fresh blood, and that fresh blood involves people who have great interest in the committee. There were a number of us who wanted nothing to do with it because at the time it was so contentious and there was such a feeling of bad blood that it just was not, it was not conducive to the digestion. And some of us simply did not want to run the committee. And there are just, we need to have both the people who attend the meetings, the 20 or 30 people who are stalwarts of the community, and those people who live in the community and have many other things in their lives that presuppose the possibility of attending a meeting. We need to hear from all of them. And by going online, but still having a live meeting, we can do that. And that's really one of the ways that we can increase the participation. I could go into what we did with the 20th and 21st Street bike lanes as an example of how we work those things together. But I won't bore you with that right now. We'll probably talk about that later and I'll bore you then.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Next up is Matthew Holden.
Yeah, I too would be supportive of reconstituting the Transportation Committee. I think, you know, the ANC only meets once a month and there's a lot to cover. So specific committees on specific interests have a lot of value. If people know that those committees exist and have notice and the ability to attend, either in person or online, I think hopefully one day we can get to a point where you know, maybe we're meeting in person, but it's broadcast online and people can participate in person and online at the same time. I also think we could be doing more proactive outreach with surveying constituents on specific issues. I would just hope that we could all continue to work together and that little attended committee meetings aren't weaponized and hijacked by people who are in the know. I think they're really important, but we need the entire community to be aware and involved.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. Moving on to SMD09. Kyle, do you want to start? And then we'll go to Ed.
Yeah, I actually have been a transportation lawyer for 34 years. My specialty is working in federal transportation policy and programs. So I do think it's very important to have a transportation committee. So I'm 100% for bringing it back. And I agree completely with everything that Matthew just says. It's an opportunity to give residents a chance to be heard and really engage on the transportation issues that we face around our neighborhood. And they do impact well beyond just you know, how we get around mobility-wise on a bike or a car or walking. They affect our development. They affect the quality of life in the neighborhood. So I'm completely supportive of bringing it back.
Okay, thank you. Ed?
Thank you, Glenn. Yes, of course I'm in favor of bringing back the Transportation Committee. I've always believed that the best decisions are made when large groups of people are involved in the decision-making process. I also believe that when large groups of people are involved in the decision-making process, those who may not agree with the outcome are much more likely to accept the outcome if they thought they had a fair opportunity to present their point of view and to be heard. It is extremely important to listen to all points of view and let all people believe not only was justice done, but it has to be seen to be done. Not only must we have outreach, it has to be seen to be outreach. It's very important for the dynamics of a good working community relationship. And not only should we bring the Transportation Committee back, but those meetings should be, I'd love them to be on Zoom at least, but we should consider streaming them all the time for the residents. And the ANC should bring back its outreach committee. It abolished its outreach committee several years ago for reasons I don't understand. The outreach committee, the very purpose of the outreach committee was to get more citizens involved in the decision-making process. I believe that is incredibly important for an open, transparent, and democratic ANC.
Next up, SMD1, Matt Sampson.
To answer the question, I think that we need to make sure that not only are we, you know, making sure that we're getting voices, and we need to make sure that those voices are diverse. And, you know, we represent a whole cross section of DuPont residents. For me personally, as a young person, it was very sad to see the Twitter go, because that's a really big way for young people to engage with our local government. I would really like to see that Twitter account come back. And yes, I am in support of reinstating TPI. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Meg?
Yes, I also agree with the consensus that the Transportation Committee should be reestablished. And it gives an opportunity to engage residents, both as members of the committee, but also in the issues that continue to arise with respect to the various issues on transportation. One of them around options for everybody, not just the able-bodied. We are a diverse community, and we have diverse needs. So the Transportation Committee is a good opportunity for ensuring that people with children, elderly, people with injuries, whether temporary or permanent, are heard and that their needs are being met. I also do like the idea of partnering with other ANCs. Transportation is a shared issue, and we have an opportunity to work with the ANCs that are adjacent to ours, where our transportation networks are connecting on issues of safety, for example. And then also partnering with the DCCA, because I think what we've heard tonight is that one of the challenges we have is getting community members invested and involved. And there may be other ways working with the DCCA and other community groups to find ways to meet residents where they are and engage them in the work of the Transportation Committee.
Thanks, Meg. Daniel, you're up next.
I'm a fan of committees for a couple reasons. One is it gets you additional input on a long-standing basis, and community members who can think back to the last thing that was discussed and try and bring that precedent forward. And theoretically, you can have a longer conversation at the committee meeting. So at the ANC, you can have different conversations. That's not really how all committees go, though. And often what we found was we were having the same conversation at TPI and then the same conversation with the same amount of time at the full ANC meeting itself. For a committee to work, I believe you have to have alignment between the committee and the commission so that you're not just having the same conversation and debate again. And for that alignment to happen, I think you need a commissioner to be chair. There's only 9 commissioners. It's a volunteer role. Different folks have different abilities to contribute and different interests. You know, I'm excited that there are going to be a lot of new commissioners next year because it sounds like, you know, among all the potential new commissioners who want to the TPI committee back, I expect at least one of them to put up their hands and say, I am willing to chair it. And we'll be excited to have TPI back next year.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to SMD 03, Robin Nunn. Want to go first?
Yeah, sounds great. The question had 2 parts, not just should we institute the TPI, and I take Daniel's point that we do need someone to step up and lead that. But the other part of the question was, how do we bring residents closer to the government? And during this time, we need to put forward measures in place to provide a portal in which those unable to participate can be heard. The meeting minutes are expeditiously made available to the public, and that a self-audit of practices is conducted on a frequent basis. Residents should be able to get in touch with their ANC in an easy way. I believe in expanding community engagement is vital. ANCs are on the front lines, bridging the gap between government and the people, and I've always served in that role as both bridge and advocate in my career. Without meaningful and active engagement by ANCs, those living in this area lack the ability to have their voices be heard. I know how to unite seemingly divided forces to arrive at solutions that work for all. I have a demonstrated history of helping communities and residents thrive. I support initiatives that promote education and community building. I will be proactive and available 24/7 via phone, email, social media, internet, and in person. I would seek ways to invigorate interest in ANCs and neighborhood initiatives. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Joseph?
Thank you for this question. I am definitely in support of bringing back TPI and more committees as well. Many of the conversations I've been having with neighbors around my area is that people don't even know what ANC is, and even those who do know what ANC stands for, what it does, they feel that they are always left out of the conversation. I think with us being so diverse, with different needs, different concerns, and different expectations, we have to always pay attention to the emotions that people have. We have to always be sensitive to people's needs. I'm going to focus on building personal relationships with people. I'm not going to read off of a script every time I'm talking to them. I'm not going to look stuff up. I'm going to build friendships on a personal level. People are going to know my phone number. People are going to know what's going on in my life. And I'm also going to know what's going on in their lives. I've been learning so much about what's going on in the district. I feel that we need more engagement. And I also feel that we have to improve the website of the ANC altogether, because it feels so outdated to me. And people, in order for us to make the ANC more appealing, we have to invest in making it be so.
Okay, thank you. So keeping with the transportation theme, and William Herbig, you'll start this one off. So transportation issues, particularly those related to parking, scooters, and bike lanes, have been hot topics in the neighborhood. What does not seem to always receive as much attention, frankly, is pedestrian safety as it relates to all other forms of transportation, whether we're talking cars, bikes, scooters, etc. Recognizing that DuPont Circle is first and foremost a walkable neighborhood, which includes young children and people with disabilities, what are your thoughts on ensuring the safety of pedestrians specifically, and what specific enhanced pedestrian safety measures would you favor?
Perfect. Thank you, Glenn, for this question. My mantra in both my personal life and professional life is people first, not cars. And so we should always be looking at the needs of people, pedestrians first, and then figure out how we best accommodate those needs within our limited public right-of-way, really defined as the space between buildings on one side of the street, buildings on the other side. How do we equitably allocate that space between buildings? As I was listening to the responses to the last question, and we kept talking about the Transportation Committee, I kept thinking we actually should, if we reinstate this, or when we reinstate this, perhaps we rename it the Mobility Committee, because transportation as a phrase begins to imply cars and buses and all these fast moving things. Mobility is a more people-focused, people-centered approach. So perhaps we start with changing the name, restart the committee, think about mobility, and always place the needs of people first.
Okay, thank you. Mike Silverstein, your thoughts?
There have been 5 people killed in the last 4 years within or just beyond the boundaries of my single member district in crashes with automobiles and trucks. And 3 of those people weren't riding anything. 1 was a pedestrian on his way home from work, and 2 were gentlemen just sitting in a park when someone drove an SUV at high speed up into the park, out of control, and killed them. The other 2, there was a bicyclist who was killed by someone who didn't see him because it was a poorly designed bike lane. And the 5th was a scooter rider who was killed by someone in DuPont Circle who made an illegal turn. In any case, pedestrian safety is an extremely important issue because of the fact that we are the most walkable neighborhood in the city. No other neighborhood has a higher percentage of people walking to work than does DuPont. And there is just no greater concern than the safety of people. And we're all pedestrians. Even if you get out of a car, you're going to walk somewhere to get into a building. If you're a bicyclist, you're going to get off and you're going to walk somewhere. We need to first work with the DC police to enforce some of the laws, especially regarding places like DuPont Circle. Jeremy Brady is a great cop. He is the traffic cop. But if we could clone him, if someone can help me do that, fine. Otherwise, we need to pressure our city government to have more than one person doing traffic enforcement in the district, within our ANC. It's a matter of enforcement more than anything else.
Okay, Mike, I think your time's up. Thank you. Matthew Holden, you're next.
So I think this is an issue that we as an ANC can play a really important role in. The DC Council recently passed the Vision Zero Omnibus Bill, which will greatly enhance pedestrian safety with the ultimate goal of reducing traffic deaths to zero, which is what it should be. But that's only going to happen if they fund and actually enforce those laws. And there are provisions in the Vision Zero bill that you can get traffic cameras and ban right on red at certain intersections, but some of those things have to be requested by ANCs. So I think that'll be really important for us to survey which intersections we know to be dangerous. For example, I live just north of New Hampshire and 17th Street, which is a diagonal. A lot of our diagonals, while they add an interesting flair to the city, are very dangerous for cyclists and pedestrians and people driving, people in wheelchairs, everyone. I've witnessed multiple accidents at that intersection. So I think making sure the city, using our role, our bully pulpit, as Mike previously said, to make sure that the city actually lives up to Vision Zero and it's not just a slogan, will be essential.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. Moving on to SMD 09, we'll go in reverse order. Ed, do you want to go first? Ed, you're still on mute.
Technology challenge. Pedestrian safety is very important. As an older individual and a dog owner, I can only tell you that many people say it's incredibly dangerous to walk your dogs at night along 16th Street. On the sidewalks. We have the electric scooters on the sidewalks were a problem. Bikes on the sidewalks from the Circle to U Street are also a problem at night because they're quiet and you can't hear them coming up from behind you if you're a pedestrian walking a dog. And I always worry that one of my dogs is going to get hurt. We need better enforcement at major intersections, especially my neighborhood along 16th Street, both for vehicles and for cyclists to ensure the safety of vehicle drivers, cyclists, and pedestrians. But let's talk about pedestrians for a moment with respect to 17th Street. 17th Street right now has extended sidewalks and is reduced to one lane of traffic. We want to make 17th Street pedestrian friendly so that pedestrians can feel like they can walk and enjoy 17th Street. We want to make it pedestrian friendly by extending the sidewalks. And that is something I think the ANC should be involved in and should want on a permanent basis. And I believe we can, that would help integrate business.
Can you hear the bell? Can you all hear the bell? It's very loud.
No, Carrie, it's not coming out, at least my end, very loud. So if you could try to.
Okay, I thought I might be overwhelming people with it.
Yeah.
No, not overwhelming.
No, don't worry about that.
All right. Okay.
No.
Okay, Kyle, your turn.
Okay. Well, first of all, let's just start with sidewalks are for pedestrians. And the number one priority of users on sidewalks is to promote pedestrian safety. And we have to make sure that that's clear and that that's understood and that the laws that say that should actually be actively enforced in the neighborhood. We should actually then invest in the infrastructure and look at where it is appropriate to put in bike lanes where we can take bikes and scooters and get them off of our sidewalks for the betterment of all users of the roadways. I do also agree that we need to start looking at where we can expand our sidewalks, certainly along 17th Street. The temporary changes with COVID, a lot of that's are planting ideas that should be made permanent to make it a much more pedestrian-friendly street. There was a number of choke points along the sidewalk that didn't need to be there before, and I think we can eliminate those going forward. And my final comment on it, I'm getting it. I heard the bell.
Just 10 seconds. 10 seconds.
Oh, well, my last comment is I always thought we did a very poor job trying to sequence our walk signals and our traffic signals. They never prioritized walkers. They prioritized cars. We need to really rethink that throughout our neighborhood. because I think that's one of the reasons why people rush into the streets when they're waiting far too long for mistimed traffic signals.
Thank you. So move on to SMD01. Meg, do you want to give us your thoughts?
Thank you. I think we're embarking on a grand experiment as we transition to shared space in our roadways, transitioning to more bicycle-friendly and alternative transport-friendly usage. And what this means is that the rules aren't always clear to everybody at every time. And so I think there are 4 things we need to do, and the ANC can be a catalyst for these efforts. The first is obviously better enforcement as to the biggest force on the road, which is cars, and on from there to the other alternative modes of transport, to make sure that everybody is clear about what the rules are. But secondly, outreach and education to our constituents as we transition so that they understand what their rights are in those spaces. And third is monitoring. I think the ANC, through this newly reconstituted Transportation Committee, could be looking at how they're working out, where the challenges are, and finally recommend design changes and improvements to address the safety gaps that we know exist and that are going to arise as we transition to new forms of transport and mobility.
Thank you, Meg. Matthew?
Okay, I love this question because I am the pedestrian commissioner. That's kind of what I was doing before I was a commissioner, was pushing for, visibility for pedestrian activism, making sure that our streets are safer for pedestrians. As a commissioner, I actually got three intersections. The pedestrian safety infrastructure was installed at those intersections. So at 19th and T, 19th and S, and 20th and S. They've recently just installed curb extensions. Flexi posts are going to go out. In addition to that, we are working on making Connecticut and Florida, that intersection, we are repainting. Unfortunately, DDOT couldn't commit to a lot of changes that I wanted, but they are repainting the crosswalk there, making things more visible there. So I've shown through my first term that I'm very committed to this kind of thing. I really appreciate, the enforcement and the education part of it, but I'm big on the design. We need to change the design of our streets so that cars and drivers feel much more, they feel like they have to go slower. They feel they have to be deferential to pedestrians. I think that enforcement and education and the other E's of Vision Zero only go so far, and it's really time to step it up and, commit to changing our streets, changing the design of our streets so that pedestrians and bicyclists are safe. And my last comment is, pedestrianism is really the ultimate carbon-free form of transportation. So the more that we can promote pedestrianism, that's much better for our future. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Daniel?
Yeah, thank you. Ultimately, what makes pedestrians safe also makes people on the sidewalks safe, sidewalk and cyclists and scooters safe. If you want scooters and cyclists off of the sidewalk, we need protected bike lanes where people are safe. We need to focus on people. That means keeping our temporary pandemic infrastructure after the pandemic is over, including streeteries and sidewalk extensions, among others. There's been a lot of talk about enforcement, but the best enforcement really is self-enforcement through better design. If you've been to Copenhagen or Amsterdam, those places didn't always look like what they look like right now. It was a matter of actively changing street design to deprioritize cars and reprioritize people. Talking about enforcement and law enforcement, the Metropolitan Police Department is not always there. And when the cops are there, there is immense discretion in enforcement, and that discretion gets taken out disproportionately on our Black and brown neighbors and not on people who look like me. So I want to be careful when we talk about enforcement and really pivot our efforts towards better design so folks are safer all around instead of expecting the cops to intervene, because that does not always lead to the best engagements in our neighborhood.
Thanks, Daniel. Joseph?
Okay, so I've been living on 18th Street now for 5 years. I walk everywhere, and I was never hit by a car. I was hit twice by a bike. Nevertheless, I think that walking around the neighborhood, I think that the best approach for this is to examine it on a case-by-case basis. There are areas where we need to follow sophisticated designs for streets, but there are street areas also around DuPont that we need cars, where, you know, DuPont Circle is a busy area. People come in and out, they come go shopping, you know, so we need to just kind of work together to understand what is the best ultimately for DuPont Circle as a neighborhood, as a community. There are places where we need more protection for bikes and scooters, but there are other places where we need to focus more on the pedestrian. And there are other places where we need to recognize that this is a busy shopping area where cars come and go. And that at the end of the day, my job as an ANC is to listen from everybody's, learn about their concerns and expectations, and go to the commission, explain the issue, explain the demand, explain the concern, and then if I have to, I will keep calling and calling government agencies until I get something fixed. And that is the best thing that I can accomplish as an ANC.
Okay, thank you. Robin?
As Mike mentioned, pedestrian deaths have gone up with the pandemic. Our slow streets are not enforced and people don't feel comfortable walking in them. And safe infrastructure projects get held up with polarizing neighbors on all sides. My mother was killed by a speeding driver, so this issue is very near and dear to my heart. When I talk with neighbors, everyone agrees that safer streets is a universal goal. Ross Elementary School is around the corner from me, and parents want safer sidewalks and crosswalks for kids going to school. 17th Street is the street I live on, and with all of the competing uses of the street, the safety of people, regardless if they're walking or biking, is and always should be the top priority. With every street change before the ANC, I will make sure that pedestrian safety is paramount. That is my promise to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Diane Quinn?
I am an advocate for pedestrians, absolutely. Most of my transportation is walking. I walk Maggie back and forth throughout the neighborhood all the time. What I am concerned about is street design. What I see is that in many places, the design is not consistent with the usage for that particular area. If you've ever walked along 14th Street, we've now got the streeteries, we've got cutouts. People don't know which way to go, and it's very, very, very confusing. And wouldn't be surprised if somebody wasn't really seriously hurt. I do think that the suggestion that we look at what transportation needs are for the particular population and to get input from residents about what they think they will need. We are undergoing a new normal. What was may not exist now. In other words, the kinds of transportation we had planned in the past, what kinds of passageways that we had planned in the past may not be appropriate now. Our community is a walking community, but the signaling we have is awful. There are no signals on the 15th Street bike lanes below the area above St. Augustine's Church that are actually 4 signals for cyclists, and cyclists are one of the major issues, particularly with the trees overhang onto the street. You can't see, you can't hear them, and in the evening, as Ed said, it is incredibly dangerous for a pedestrian to be walking down 15th Street on the west side of the street. So I am all for pedestrian safety. I am for all safety for all persons who live and work and pass their way in the District of Columbia.
All right, thank you, Diane. Mo?
Glenn, and thank you to all the candidates. I'm really looking forward to working with you all on this important issue, and my condolences to Robin and to all those who have suffered a loss as a result of this failure to put people first, as we have heard earlier. One solution that has not been mentioned that I just want to throw out is raised crosswalks. I think that's a really clear indication that we are putting our pedestrians first, that cars are not the priority, that we need to prioritize people who are walking in our neighborhood and keeping those people safe.
Okay, thank you. So next question, we're going to switch subjects. I'll be starting with SMD09. So Kyle, you'll be going first. So the question is, the architecture of the neighborhood, including its existing massing and height, is a defining feature of DuPont Circle. How do you view the importance of historic preservation and the consistent application of historic preservation and zoning rules and regulations? Kyle, you got to mute yourself.
Sorry, Glenn.
No problem.
I'm a strong supporter of historic preservation. When I first bought my house, I was just outside of the old 16th Street, or the current 16th Street Historic District. We had not yet declared our area historic. But I still reached out to the Historic Preservation Office and had Steve Colcott actually come over to my house and guide me through how I could restore my house to historic standards, even though I didn't live in a historic district. I've also been a longtime member of the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and I spent years working with Dick Moe, who was the longtime president of the National Trust for Historic Preservation, on proposals on Capitol Hill to try to restore tax credits for homeowners who actually invested their money to renovate their historic homes. So it's certainly a very important cause to me. I take it very seriously. I'm a very strong believer in preserving our historic preservation in this area. I don't think this is done because it's protecting our property values or anything like that. It preserves the character of the neighborhood, our history, our architecture, and the character of the neighborhood. So I do very much believe in consistent enforcement and preserving the street feel and the streetscapes around DuPont Circle. We're a treasure and we need to protect that, and we really need to recognize it. That's one of the primary keys of making this neighborhood so special.
Thank you. Ed?
Thank you, Glenn. Yes, let's take a couple of examples, Glenn. One is the Mason's Temple project. That is to be a 5-story large apartment building with a 2-story underground garage with penthouses on top, directly across from small row houses on S Street. It would destroy the last open green space in DuPont Circle. I viewed it as unfortunate that this ANC supported that project. Let me talk a moment about upflumming, Glenn. Upflumming is a change in land use maps. Now, there was a proposal in front of the ANC earlier this year to upflum DuPont Circle from the circle up to Florida Avenue by turning it into high residential, high commercial. That would have allowed buildings 8 to 12 stories high along both sides of Connecticut Avenue up to Florida, when right now what we have is predominantly 4-story row house type buildings. Yes, I fought against that. I was able to convince 3 other commissioners to vote against that proposal too, including Mike Silverstein. And I'm glad I did. That proposal did not pass, and this ANC did not recommend to the DC government that it upflum DuPont Circle, Connecticut Avenue from the circle to Florida. And I'm very proud of that achievement because I think it was an important achievement in trying to preserve the historic quality of this neighborhood.
Thanks, Ed. So now we'll move back up to SMD01. Matt Sampson, your thoughts?
Cool. So I'm not going to lie. I'm quite neutral on historic preservation in general. That said, what is really important to me is my constituents' input, and lots of constituents in 2B01 truly deeply value historic preservation. I truly believe that our values don't clash. I don't think that my position on historic preservation clashes with my constituents' opinions. I think that there is a way to balance housing needs with historic preservation, and I have supported that kind of balance. I have encouraged my constituents, and I've never stood in their way. I've always connected them to HPRB if they've ever had issues and they wanted to voice them. I've connected them, after the vote to HPRB and to hearings. So that's my position on it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Meg?
Thank you. We're in a historic district that enjoys legal protection through both the Historic District and Historic Preservation Act. And so developments that are a matter of right still must clear the bar of historic preservation. Historic preservation trumps zoning. That's a decision that governs development in our neighborhood. And that means compatibility not just with the house being developed, but with the adjacent house and the surrounding neighborhood, because we have a collective interest in preserving our history, as we've noted. What I think that means is that it puts a premium on what we talked about at the beginning, ensuring that neighbors are adequately informed, timely, and sufficiently so that there can be discussion about development that implicates not just the house next door or the immediate houses, but the neighborhood. I've talked with businesses during my campaign, and they also are concerned about development that implicates historic development because they see the value in the streetscape that we have. It also benefits them. We have a big district. We do have areas that are underutilized and less dense, and those are places that can be prioritized for development while preserving the treasure that we have of our neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thanks, Meg. Daniel?
Yeah, I'm a big supporter of historic preservation. At the same time, oftentimes folks can think that historic preservation protects more than it really does. Historic preservation is not about setting the neighborhood in amber. It's about ensuring compatibility with the neighborhood. And a project that meets all zoning criteria, otherwise called by right, you can't just say, it can't just be blocked because of historic preservation considerations, but the design of it, the massing of it, there are certain parts of it that you can see from the outside that do get review, but the purpose of the review isn't to stop a building from happening, it's to let the building be built in context. When it comes to zoning, needs to meet the test. There are higher levels of tests, whether it's a variance or a special exception. Thanks to a zoning overlay from the 1970s, which DCCA was instrumental in supporting, the DuPont Circle ANC doesn't really deal with planned unit developments in our residential area because PUDs are subject to the base density zoning limits of the underlying zone. Essentially, it's not worth it for anyone to do a PUD in DuPont Circle, so we don't really see those. Which are seen in a lot of other areas of the district. When we talk about historic preservation, it is important to note, DC is one of the most historic cities in the country. If you take it by buildings that are labeled historic, we're about 12 times more historic than Chicago. I don't know how often you guys go to Chicago. DC is not 12 times more historic than Chicago. The way that historic preservation law has been applied in DC is notably different than it has been applied elsewhere in the district. That's kind of a macro level question that I think about a lot, that we should be discussing more. That said, when it comes to project by project basis, that's not what I'm thinking about on the ANC.
Okay, thanks, Daniel. Robin? Your final?
I'm a strong believer in advocating for our community and ensuring historic preservation. I didn't just come here recently, and I didn't just start preparing to run in 2006. I'm not going to tell you my age, but let's just say I've been preparing to run since the 1970s. I was born and raised in the DMV area, and I've lived in DuPont Circle area for almost 10 years now. I care deeply about the people in the community, and I care deeply about the historic preservation and zoning. And I want to ensure that everyone, no matter how rich or poor or whatever your background is, you have a representative that will listen to you. As I said in the beginning, I'm a member of the DuPont Circle Citizens Association. I'm a member of the Economic Enhancement Committee of the historic DuPont Circle Main Street. I'm a member of the Safety and Security Committee of the DuPont Circle Business Improvement District. I am here for you, and I'm a representative that will listen and fight for you. Working for this neighborhood is not something that I aspire to do. It is something that I do, and it is what I have been doing all my life, and I will fulfill that promise to the people I represent always. Thank you.
Thanks, Robin. Yosef? You have to unmute yourself.
Okay, so one of my favorite things about DuPont Circle is its historical nature. And one of the first issues I learned about talking to neighbors was the need to keep DuPont's historical character. I do recognize that there is a need for a balance to balance things out. While we have developers around, buildings, apartments, rentals, all that, we also have to make sure that it's a residential area at the end of the day. We have to make sure that people who come and build developments are respecting the nature of DuPont Circle, but most of all, respecting that this is a residential area. And by making sure that that balance is there, we also ensure that DC and DuPont Circle especially is open always to everyone from all economic levels who to allow them to be able to live in this area. I am for supporting maintaining DC's DuPont Circle's historical preservation, but I'm also, that doesn't mean that I don't want people coming in here and building new buildings and keeping our neighborhood up to date. I just want to make sure that at the end of the day, we keep it, we keep this mind, we keep the residents in mind.
Thank you. Mo, would you like to weigh in?
Thank you, Glenn. So I view historic preservation as something that's more than just how a building looks. It's the history of the neighborhood. It's exciting for me to live next to the Grimke House, not just because it's an old building, but because what that woman represented in our nation's history. I also think that, like Daniel said, historic preservation doesn't mean that we freeze a neighborhood in one time for eternity. For example, we were able to bring electricity to DuPont Circle. And I think that that same kind of mindset, making sure that we're bringing community voices, shouldn't stop us from making improvements like expanding residential solar. And as we continue to address climate change, that's something that we need to do. But again, that doesn't mean that historic preservation just goes away. As long as we're bringing community voices, I know we can work together to achieve both aims.
Thank you. Diane, your thoughts? You're on mute. You need to unmute yourself.
I'm a strong proponent for historical preservation, and I am because I live in a row of townhouses that were built in the 1880s. I also am a strong proponent because I know of the history, particularly in the DuPont area. I'm very familiar with the history about the Grimkes, and there are many other, in particular African-American intelligentsia that lived in this area. And many of their houses, need to be preserved just by the very fact that they are historic, and there are plaques in front of many of them. One of the concerns I do have is the developments where they are not in context with what is happening with the rest of the community. Yes, we do need modern construction. Yes, we do need renovations, but we also need to protect our history and what makes this community so particularly precious. And it is the history, and it is the historic buildings, and it is the design and the fact that we have retained that history that makes it such a delightful place to live.
Thank you. William?
Yes, thank you. You know, I think it's a false choice between choosing a historic neighborhood versus contemporary investments in the neighborhood. I live at 1745 Inn Street, which is connected, the new development connected to the Tabard Inn. Those condos are a combination of a wonderful renovation of what we call the historic row, which fronts Inn Street. And talking about the stories of historic buildings, I just learned the other day that Julia Childs once lived in the building. What a wonderful story to celebrate a former DuPont neighbor. But behind the historic row, we have the modern flats, and I'm actually in that building. So I get the best of both worlds of living in a historic building on the front, but a modern building in the back. I think there are those type of opportunities throughout DuPont as we continue to look at accommodating growth over time. How do we do that in the smart surgical ways? And not making the tough choice, historic or not, but to balance that going forward. I would also add that we are not a residential only community. The 5th district, we have a lot of commercial south of Massachusetts Avenue, and historic preservation and new development issues south of Mass in the more commercial parts of our neighborhood and community also need to be considered going forward.
Okay. Thank you. Mike?
I would add to what William said that Julia Child was a spy when she worked down here. That she actually was working with what was the Office of Strategic Services during World War II, which later became the CIA. Some remarkable people, many of whom were in our neighborhood, started that organization. We have to have development of some sort in our neighborhood, simply because there is a 36,000 at least unit shortage of housing in the city. And we're going to be forced to do our part. And what we need to do is make sure that the development itself is responsible, reasonable, and does not tear at the historic fabric, and also does not strain at the resources of our infrastructure. We've had some terrific additions such as the Drake, and there'll probably be another one involving that same near that same property, where there had been a parking lot, and now there's a 9-story, I believe it's 9-story apartment that is a spectacular infill, and that you don't even notice that it's there. Pop-ups, no. Things that directly insult the historic fabric, the rhythm, the massing of rows of houses, no. But we need to do things to make sure that there will be increased population in our neighborhood. And one reason is because our 17th Street neighborhood serving businesses have more competition now from U Street and from 14th Street. And in order for them to survive, we need to have more people in our neighborhood who are able to walk to and to support our businesses. It's a balance that we have to strike, and I hope we can do so wisely.
Thanks, Mike. Matthew Holden?
So in 2BOA in North DuPont, we're potentially the smallest SMD, but I also think we're one of the, from a building perspective, I like to say that we're like the home of missing middle housing. We have a lot of row houses, we have a lot of small apartments, and we have a lot of very large apartments. Some of the largest apartments in DuPont Circle, I believe, are within our district. And to me, that's what the historic character of DuPont Circle is. It's this mix of different types of houses from different eras. Personally, my favorite historic building in the whole city is the Cairo. A height and massing that a lot of people would say is out of context and out of character, but is historic and houses a lot of people and has a neat story. So I also believe that the application of historic districts sometimes is overly intense, contributing structures and buildings that are landmarked, I think of course should be preserved, but otherwise a vibrant mismatch of different types of housing for different types of people is what will keep DuPont Circle vibrant moving forward and historic for the rest of time.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. It's just after 9 o'clock, so I'm going to call an audible here and ask that the answers to these next two questions be 45 seconds or less. Carrie, and the next one, some of you have already touched on it, but I do want to ask a specific question about affordable housing. As a couple of you alluded to, Washington is facing an acute shortage of affordable housing, especially for low and moderate income people who make less than 60% of the average median income. As I think Mike referred to, the mayor has set targets for adding new housing in all the wards of the city. Can you give us your perspective on the type, density, and I think most importantly, location of these types of new developments that would be most appropriate for DuPont? And let me start with SMD03. Joseph, do you want to start?
Yes, housing in DuPont Circle is a big issue. We have to make sure that everyone is able to live here. We have to make sure that everybody is able to afford. I rent myself, and every year my rent goes up and up and up. And sooner or later, I'm going to have to leave DuPont because I won't be able to, sustain my living in the area. So it's an important issue, and I know it's an important issue for so many other people as well. I also want to make sure that, given that we are in a pandemic, I'm aware of Mayor Bowser's efforts, the 36,000 housing units that are being built, 12,000 of which are going to be dedicated to low-income people, but they're calling it affordable housing. But I want to make sure that we define the word affordable, because sometimes what I can afford is not affordable to somebody else. So again, this is also going to require a collective debate, a collective discussion among all of us.
Thank you. Robin?
First, I'd start off by saying that I'm not going anywhere, regardless of whatever happens with housing prices. I will be in 2B0.
I will never leave if I can afford.
Yosef, you had your time. It's my time now. I'm going nowhere. As we all know, the last 2B03 ANC commissioner had to leave the commission because he moved. I won't be moving. One of the tragic revelations from the pandemic is the enormous inequality that most of our fellow Americans suffer in this day and age. There is an inherent problem in our society when a sliver of our population owns more wealth than half of the population combined. Affordable housing is a major crisis in most urban American cities. The average American is having to work 2 or 3 jobs at this point, and skyrocketing prices of living in the city. For this reason, I fully support Mayor Bowser and her initiatives to bring housing affordability to the district. With wages stagnating across the board, the cost of living rising, there's a global pandemic. We really need to come together, and it is vital that we plan for the future housing needs of the district now. And I support any initiative that equitably provides housing for those who have been displaced by rising rents and lowered incomes. And as a neighborhood commissioner, I would make it a priority to identify programs and resources to help take the immense burden off of individuals and families struggling to afford a place to live. We must ensure that more housing is available, but we must also demand that such housing is sustainable in the long-term planning of the city. Mixed income housing holds a unique promise for promoting upward mobility, providing affordable housing and safer neighborhoods. My time is short, I only have 45 seconds, but this is something that's near and dear to my heart, and being on the DCCA Homeless Committee, and I'm happy to talk about it further later.
Okay, next, Mo.
Thank you, Glenn. And I think housing affordability is something that we all need to work together to make sure that more people can stay in what really is a wonderful neighborhood. Margarita and I are fortunate enough to live in a rent-controlled apartment, and I support the Reclaim Rent Control platform to expand that and make rent control available to more people. I also think that we need to look at where we are building new housing, and like Robin said, make sure that that's built in places that are safe and families want to live in. For example, not to step on William's shoes here, but south of Massachusetts, those offices might be a good opportunity to convert some of them into housing, especially affordable housing. We just need to work together as a community.
Thank you. Diane? You need to unmute.
Affordable housing, equity in housing is one of my major concerns and why I am a candidate for ANC. The thing that I have seen across the district, having lived and worked in the district for many, many years, is that the affordable housing that is being torn down and it is not being replaced. People are being outplaced, and properties that easily could have been renovated and restored to living condition. And I'm talking about some of those, including in Northwest, up off of Georgia Avenue. I'm including Berry Farms, which has been totally torn down and has for the last 2 years been absolutely flattened. A housing that could be available for people in an affordable range has been destroyed. I also think that we need to have housing for those first responders, those persons who serve us, like firemen, like nurses, like teachers. They all now live in Maryland or Virginia because they can't afford to live in the city, and yet they serve us. And these are not what is traditionally called affordable housing, but this is housing for people who serve us. We need to be able to better plan for housing. And in addition to that, the housing that we do have, I think that for small landlords who are willing to provide housing for city servants, I think that we should be looking at how do we compensate them for their contributions such that if you make a certain income and you're over 65, there are some tax breaks and tax incentives. And I think that we should incent landlords who are willing to help provide affordable housing, equitable housing for city workers in particular. I think that they should have some kind of tax incentive to do so. So I think there are a lot of ideas that we can throw out, but those are some of the ones that I would support.
Okay, thank you. William?
Yes. You know, I mentioned in my opening statement about being displaced during the flood. And when we were displaced, and Glenn and I found our way back, I vowed to not close the gate behind me in terms of affordability and for those to have access to our neighborhood. During that time period, we did live at the Drake, which Mike just mentioned. Not only does it fit contextually within the 17th Street corridor as it meets Mass Ave, it is an innovative micro unit solution that can house and meet a different need, a housing need for DuPont neighbors and residents. I love Mo's idea of using and converting maybe underutilized commercial properties south of Massachusetts Avenue. So hopefully some of us will have an opportunity to work on that going forward as we think differently about current uses.
Great, thanks. Mike?
There is a crisis in commercial real estate right now in our neighborhood. Right now, less than 10% of all the commercial real estate in terms of office is being used on a regular basis because of the pandemic, according to the Castle company that does the cards that see who goes in and who goes out. And when the pandemic is over, you're going to have all of these law firms and all these other firms saying, do we really need to have as big a footprint as we've been having in the past? And the answer is going to be no. They're going to scale back, and our C and D properties, our older commercial properties, are going to just fall off the cliff. Those are going to be great opportunities to change those to residential. They will be 2 and 3 bedroom, which are which are just so hard to find now. But in order for it to happen, the city is going to have to change the tax code, because you can't expect people to be paying commercial real estate tax and then charging affordable rent to renters. So we're going to have to look at and reimagine those things. And there's a whole lot that can be said about this, but that is the one opportunity that we have now that we have to look at and reimagine our city.
Thanks, Mike. William Holden? Or excuse me, Matthew Holden. Sorry.
Hi.
I like William Holden.
So I think DuPont Circle is a neighborhood rich in amenities. I think it's incumbent on neighborhoods like ours to encourage more housing here for people of all income levels, so we don't, as we get more expensive, we don't push people out to other neighborhoods, causing rent and housing prices in those other neighborhoods to also rise. I think anytime we as an ANC are obstructive in new housing developments, like the Masonic Temple is a great example. I think when we fight against those projects, we are adding to the cost of housing and adding to the cost of development and preventing people from living in this neighborhood where they would benefit from our amenities and we could benefit from them. I also think placing housing near DuPont Circle Metro Station, up-plumbing Connecticut Avenue is a perfect solution to increasing density on a busy corridor and would help provide housing, but also help our commercial situation for our local businesses. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Kyle?
Well, I would agree with one of the points that Mode made earlier. I'm always been a very strong proponent of rent control laws. I do think we need them to protect people from being displaced, priced out while people try to then recycle properties into condos and upsell those properties. I also like preserving the laws that allow tenant conversions, that right of first refusal and tenant organizations to actually become owners under those scenarios. I think we ought to be more aggressive about taking advantage of those. We have several of them here that occurred in the past 10 to 15 years in SBO 9, and they've been very successful along the 1400 block of T Street. I'm also very excited by the fact that the cities, when they're talking about the redevelopment of the Reeve Center, that they're actually talking about it as a mixed-use development and not strictly as an office building development. I think it's another opportunity to try to weave in housing, jumping again on one of the points that Will earlier made, and Mo as well, that we're going to have to rethink how we use a lot of office space in the post-pandemic world. And I think if we look along our busiest corridors, 14th Street, U Street, and others throughout the city, there are lots still available where we could do modest buildings that I think would fit in the character of the building, could fit in the scale of the neighborhood, and still take advantage of the amenities and the infrastructure, the transportation options that we offer here. So I think we need to be creative. I think we need to pressure the city, as Mike Silverstein said, to put some real money on the table to help this process along, so that we can actually have true affordable housing and not just top dollar properties being produced. But I think we've all got to get creative. We got to roll up our sleeves, and we all got to get together on that and try to have a real consensus on where we can put those properties and what we can do about it.
Thanks, Kyle. Ed?
Thank you, Glenn. Yes, the issue of affordable housing is really important here. Something like the Mason's Temple project is not affordable housing. Those units are going to be renting for $4,000 plus a month for a one-bedroom apartment. That's not affordable housing. Teachers, firemen, policemen, policewomen cannot afford to live in our neighborhood with that kind of price structure. Now we need to talk about real affordable housing. Let's talk about a couple of things. One, we might consider changing the zoning laws to allow in two-unit flats, we might consider allowing in an owner-occupied flat a third unit. That wouldn't require changing the outdoor characteristic, the historic characteristic of the block, but it would, for instance, allow aging in place. There are a lot of people who would like to age in place, and we need to consider how we can allow them to do that, because when you become a senior, you have an income drop. Now we should talk about the senior citizen tax credit. People in my neighborhood are paying $12,000 a year in property taxes. When you retire, you may not be able to afford that, but you and your wife together may be just over the income limit to qualify for the senior citizen tax credit. We need to raise the ceiling on the senior citizen tax credit so that a husband and wife who together with Social Security are making a little over $125 can have their property taxes halved, as many other senior citizens do now. So we need to consider that to allow seniors to age in place. And the Reeve Center. The Reeve Center is a perfect opportunity for more affordable housing. Maintaining the post office there, the LGBTQ office there, the plaza out front there as a public plaza, but converting that, it'd be a beautiful building with its inner atrium to turn into affordable housing. And I strongly support that. It's one of the things I'm going to do for the next 2 years is work on turning the Reeve Center into residential. I don't even think mixed use. Residential would be wonderful in order to increase affordable housing.
Okay, thanks, Ed. Matt Sampson?
Yeah, so 45 seconds is very, very short time to talk about affordable housing, so I'll try my best. In my experience as a commissioner, it is extremely hard to build affordable housing, affordable units in DuPont Circle. You know, if I recall correctly, we have only about 34 affordable units, so that's the 60% AMI calculation. We only have 34 of those units. That's, I think, 0.02% of like the contributing to the city's total. So that's a really, really low number. And I think that, you know, as privileged as we are, we really need to step up and give back to DC. However, you know, it's going to be really difficult to build affordable housing with the constraints that we have. So the Masonic Temple development added about, I think, about 7 units. So even with that, that's a very meager number. it's going to be really hard for commissioners to push for more affordable housing without a supportive, constituency, or without a supportive mayor and council. One such opportunity for compromise that I think is can add to the total housing units, so not affordable but market rate unit, is townhouse conversions. Often there are families that they realize that the house is too big for them, and maybe they want to move somewhere else, or a developer buys the townhouse and then they convert it to units. What I really like about that is that we're really changing one dwelling into more, and at the same time we are preserving history. We're preserving the facade. We're preserving the visual patterns of the street. So I think that's a really great way for compromise to happen in our ANC, is to increase gently increase the density in DuPont Circle while respecting historic preservation. My last thought on that is in my lifetime, I really expect to see climate migration happening a lot more often. We've started to see Miami is sinking into the sea. We're really going to be dealing with the migration patterns over a very long time. And so now is really the time to try and step up and say that we can house people. We can house as many people as we need to be housed here. But for that to happen, we really need to be supportive. We really need to be creative, and we really need to reach compromises with our constituents. So yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Meg, your thoughts?
Thank you. There are two dimensions to this. One is in the pandemic, trying to address the people that are unsheltered and to protect the people that are at risk of becoming unsheltered. And then, as we've alluded to, making sure that our neighborhood is a neighborhood that everyone can afford to live in. And the first dimension is by far the most challenging. And I think that that's where the ANC plays a really critical role in stressing the urgency of the challenge and making it a higher priority. I think that certainly we currently have a number of unhoused in our neighborhood whose needs are acute, both with winter coming on and with the risks to COVID. We've talked about a number of some of the opportunities that we have of using vacant hotel or commercial real estate for that. Project Room Key is one project that has been utilized. Another is the NOMA initiative using containers and tiny housing. This has to be adequate, but it is a way forward. In terms of the need, the comp plan I think is a good start, but doesn't go far enough. The plan doesn't truly match the need, talking about the unhoused, in terms of shifting to so-called affordable housing, i.e. housing that is below market rate. There, the challenge I think really is to look at planning and the opportunity for additional planning to situate that housing where density is less of an issue than it is in our neighborhood. So looking again at parts of the ANC where there may be underutilized commercial space that could be repurposed, and opportunities to create more vibrancy, more streetscape life in those areas.
Okay, thank you. Daniel.
I would love to have more affordable housing in DuPont Circle. Unfortunately, we're not likely to get any new construction affordable housing. This is partially due to land costs, but it's also partially about how the district allocates low-income housing tax credits, which requires full entitlements before application, which disincentivizes developing in historic districts. The only way we're really going to add to our 34 units of dedicated subsidized affordable housing is as part of market rate projects where inclusionary zoning applies. That's every new building with greater than 10 units. That's including affordable housing at either 8% or 10%, and it should be more, and the city could do more by increasing density as well to cross-subsidize more affordable units. I find it heavily ironic that there are certain folks in our community who claim to support affordable housing, but really what they're focused on is doing everything they can to stop new developments, which stops any of the new affordable housing that's coming to our neighborhood. Being in a historic neighborhood, we have a lot of lower cost housing. There are some interesting ideas floating around about leveraging and expanding rent control to better support preservation of units, particularly preserving naturally occurring affordable housing with better income targeting. It really is a macro issue that our city suffers from. And the only way we're going to get out of it, knowing how LIHTC is allocated for our neighborhood, is thinking beyond dedicated subsidized affordable units and thinking through housing affordability, where because of how filtering works, people are coming to our neighborhood, people are coming to our city. If we don't build new housing for them, they're just going to bid up the prices at the older housing. The only way we can keep older housing relatively more affordable is by letting more new housing be built, such as at 15th and S, which was approved by the Historic Preservation Review Board.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. Next question, and just kind of warn everybody, I think we're going to go past 9:30 a bit, so hopefully you can hang with me. There's at least one audience question I do want to get to. Homelessness, which we've talked about a little bit, it's pervasive and growing in the city generally and in DuPont. What are your thoughts about how the ANC can work with the city to address this issue generally and to address the growth of encampments in DuPont? Let's start with Mike Silverstein for that.
I think this is going to be probably one of the worst winters that we've ever had. We're going to have evictions, and I guess the best way to put this is my family had to evacuate their home in California 3 weeks ago because of the Creek Fire, and we here in Washington didn't smell the smoke, but our sky was blotted out by the smoke from that fire. We cannot, as the District of Columbia, stop the homeless crisis that is happening all over America. It's not a neighborhood issue. It's not a DC issue. It's a regional and national issue. We have to do everything that we can on a small individual basis and not expect to be able to solve a problem that we cannot solve. I'll give you one example of something that, little things make a big difference. Earlier this year, the principal at Francis Stevens, School Without Walls at Francis Stevens, Richard Trogish, mentioned to me that they were doing a feeding center there, and that each day, because they wanted to make sure they didn't fall short, they had extra food. And is there anything that we could do with these grab and go lunches? And I contacted the folks at Casa Ruby because these lunches wouldn't stay for more than a day, but they were perfectly good for that day. And they said, yeah, we'd love to have them. I got a volunteer, and for the time until August 31st, while they were doing this feeding center, we would go there at the end of their feeding and pick up the lunches and take them over to Casa Ruby. And in 4 months, we drove 1,000 miles and we provided 1,000 lunches at no cost. Those are the things we have to do as individuals.
Okay, Matthew Holden, your thoughts?
Great. So I think ANC can play a role in making sure that people know about the Department of Behavioral Health. They have resources that are meant. Am I breaking up?
You are breaking up, yeah. That's better, I think. I don't know.
Okay.
Are you talking? No, you're not talking. No, you're breaking up. Uh-oh.
So I went off video.
To give more bandwidth.
Did that help at all?
Yeah. Let's see. Talk some more.
I mean, a little bit.
Did this help?
Yeah, that's the better.
Okay, sorry. So I think the ANC should make sure that people know about the Department of Behavioral Health and the resources that they have for people experiencing homelessness and our unhoused neighbors. I also think that we could learn from what some of our other neighboring ANCs have done. I know that in Mount Pleasant, they've done a lot of outreach with delivering food to people experiencing economic hardship from the pandemic. We could do things like that for our unhoused neighbors and bring more resources to the neighborhood.
Okay, great, thank you. Ed Hanlon,
You're muted.
you're muted, Ed.
Here I
There you
am. I'm muted, Glenn. Thank you. The issue of the homeless is really a heart-wrenching problem, Glenn. We live in the proudest nation on earth, the richest nation on earth, and we have encampments in front of Safeway. We have encampments in DuPont Circle. In some sense, it almost makes you want to cry because you know it's wrong and you're really not sure what to do about it. You only wish in your heart you could think of something to do. First, the encampments, part of the problem with the encampments is those people who are in the encampments, they need a safe, clean, decent place as an alternative to be placed. And this city, unfortunately, is using the sidewalks as a much cheaper way to house the homeless. This ANC should encourage the city to provide greater social services, not just police services when there's a problem with the homeless or with an encampment. So we really have to look at this deep in our heart as to figure out how to make this problem better as a community.
Okay, thank you, Ed. Kyle? Kyle, you're still on mute. Gotta mute yourself.
I've done it every time.
It's okay.
I would join in the remarks that folks are making. First of all, the ANC has to advocate for better resources and better budgets at the DC government level. And I know the council's been very generous with some of our homeless programs in the last few years, but we're now facing a massive budget crisis caused by COVID. So we've got some very troubled days ahead, not to mention the fact that they're suspending a lot of the aid programs and aid assistance programs for the homeless, such as relocating people during the pandemic. So I think we got to make sure that the city actually does not cut those budgets, maintains those budgets, and expand them, because we're going to have an increasing need as more and more people become displaced and homeless due to all the economic impacts that we've had from COVID, and that will continue through next year and probably well into 2022.
Okay, thank you. Meg?
So last night I convened a conversation with a woman who lives in my SMD, Maria Foscarinis, who is the head of the National Homelessness Law Center. And I was struck by her optimism in talking about this issue, which is unusual for people that face this challenge on both a national and local level. And the key message that came through were that we need to have a greater level of urgency. This really merits a summit. And our ANC could be a catalyst in ensuring that conversation at the national, at the citywide level, across all ANCs and with all key government agencies. It's correct that we have limited resources. We need to use them as effectively and efficiently as possible, but also with a sense of urgency and purpose. Because the other part of what she conveyed was that cities all over the country are innovating and creative and finding ways in very small ways and larger ways to find solutions to homelessness. And we ought to be looking at those, modeling those, and trying those out in different parts of the neighborhood to resolve this issue. The thing that's interesting is when people are asked, there's wide agreement that addressing homelessness can be one of the key factors in improving, quality of life of a community, with all of a shared interest in meeting the needs of the unsheltered, in giving permanent homes with adequate services to their needs, which are going to be varied.
Thanks, Meg. Matthew?
So as a commissioner, this is something I really struggle with a lot. I really do a lot of soul searching about it. It's a very complicated issue. Obviously, as Mike said, it's a complicated issue. It requires forces that are much stronger than what commissioners can do. The other thing that also makes me uncomfortable is that the city's response to homelessness is generally, to me, very inhumane. Like the camp sweeps. Although I understand what they're trying to do, it seems like it's not something that I feel comfortable doing to homeless people. And then also people mention the pandemic, but what a lot of people don't realize is that Mayor Bowser actually cut out homeless people and shelter statistics from the data. So ever since the pandemic started, we have no idea how COVID is impacting homeless people or how it's impacting the shelters. So now more than ever, it is very important for all of us to respect the wishes of the homeless people who don't want to go to those shelters. So that's something that we have to navigate. I personally, that's how I want to navigate that, is by respecting the homeless person's choice. That said, you know, I'm going to be upfront and say I don't have much in the way of offering a grand plan, but I'm willing to work together with other commissioners and through the winter to figure out something that we can do to help homeless people, to help them, you know, live through the winter, whether that's, you know, doing a drive and getting them materials or figuring out something that the city can do to respond to that. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Daniel.
Yeah, so I agree with everything Commissioner Sampson said. I do want to add on that homelessness is very complicated. There are a lot of reasons for it. Not a lot of them are at the neighborhood level. A lot of it is systemic. And also in the district, there's a lot of case law and rights surrounding all of it. And particularly people experiencing homelessness have rights to shelter, but they also have rights to choose not to shelter for whatever reasons. There's a lot of case law about this. The district focuses a lot of money on this. I don't think they focus enough money on it, but that's a decision that's made at the council level. You know, like most of the other issues that are not directly related to regulatory matters, there's no application coming in for a person experiencing homelessness like there's an application for a liquor license or a new development. The best I think we can do as an ANC is bring folks together, talk about it. The ANC hosted a town hall on homelessness, I think 2 or 3 years ago. We could look at hosting one of those again, but it's really tough in that the solutions really are not at our level of government or neighborhood. The solutions, we need to change how we are as a society. And as much as I love DuPont Circle and believe in our neighborhood and our people, I don't know if that's especially practical right now.
Okay, thanks. Joseph, your thoughts?
I think that this is an important issue. Like Mike mentioned earlier, this is a national issue that requires a national effort. But right now, given that we are going through a pandemic, we need to push here for immediate solutions that make sure that our neighborhood is safe, but also the homeless people who are going through this experience also safe and protected and respected. This is a sensitive issue that requires all of us to be mindful because they are our fellow citizens at the end of the day. And we have to work together to understand how we can help, and we have to work together to understand how we can make sure that the number of homeless people does not increase. Like I was saying earlier, when rents keep rising every year, it makes it harder and harder for people to hang on and keep on living in DuPont. So this issue, I believe, requires a short-term solution, but also hand in hand with a long-term solution. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Robin?
While this is a national problem, this is an ever-growing local issue. Homelessness is a serious problem in the DuPont area, and it can be solved through careful planning. The development of programs and initiatives that we know can work because they've worked elsewhere, and access to healthcare and other key social services are something that we can do. We should advocate for more effective inclusionary zoning regulations. We can increase density without ruining the historic character of the neighborhood. I'm an engaged and proud member of the DuPont Circle Citizens Association Homelessness Committee. When I joined, we recognized that systemic problems in DC's housing policies left an increasing number of single people, disproportionately elderly and people of color, homeless and on the streets of our neighborhood. Together with fellow 2B03 residents like Nick Manning and Joanne Garlow and many others, we are putting together a proposal for extending the moratorium on evictions until this pandemic is contained. And additionally, we have made recommendations for long-term solutions to curbing the plague of homelessness. We can do more to help this population get on their feet, get jobs, and do better. And we are developing a plan for that. I'm a trusted and recognized member of this community. I'm involved in advocacy organizations focused on the homelessness in DC. And as research shows, when the least of us does better, we all do better. These beliefs influence all I do. Thank you.
Thanks, Robin. Diane, your thoughts?
I'm currently a volunteer with Samaritan Industries, which works with people that are unsheltered and job training, etc. I also have attended recently several different conferences and seminars on addressing the homeless issue. One of the most credible examples of person-centered programs to address issues with people who are unsheltered is in Montgomery County, the Montgomery County Coalition for the Homeless. They use an approach called trauma-informed care, which is now being recommended by Children's Hospital also to treat certain forms of mental illness. My son works for the American Legion, and what he does is he finds benefits and gets benefits for persons who have been former service members. And what statistics show is that a large percent of those who are homeless also are eligible for veterans benefits. What we need to do is do a person-centered approach. Many of those who are homeless have vouchers. Our program here in the district is Housing First. Housing First without the support services for the individual to be able to live in his or her own space does not work very well, because the homeless have established their own culture. We need to address how to address this population, which is not, it doesn't mean that we don't mean we're to do well, but we are not approaching the problem in a way that is going to correct the issues. And until we do that, we are going to continue to have homelessness. One of the things also about evictions, I am definitely not for evicting anybody in this pandemic, but there are small landlords who are dependent upon those tenants' incomes, and without some kind of subsidy or tax incentives or otherwise, those persons are going to go under, and you're going to find that you're now going to have foreclosures in addition to the issues around homelessness. So this is a very complex, interrelated problem that really needs to have some comprehensive thinking in terms of how it needs to be approached. I have worked with housing, I've worked with tenant associations, I have worked with landlords, I have worked for the city in trying to solve issues for individuals who have low incomes. And so I'm very familiar with this population, and we do need to restructure how we address this issue.
Thank you. William?
Glenn, if I could jump in.
Excuse me?
Mo?
It's my turn.
Sorry, Mo. Yeah, no, you're right. My bad. Go ahead.
No worries. It's tough to add something. We've heard some from really wonderful advocates, and I want to thank everyone for what they are doing to help our neighbors. Having people sleep on the streets isn't good for those people. It's not good for our businesses, and it's not good for our community. And we need to do more to address the systemic issues and also help those individuals. One thing that I do think is important is to communicate better with neighbors, and that could be connecting them with government agencies or with nonprofits who are doing work to help. I think everyone wants to help, and we just need to figure out how to channel that effectively and to channel our energy. Thank you.
Thanks, Mo, and apologies again. William?
There's been a lot mentioned by everyone. I don't want to take up additional time because there's been a lot of great ideas. The one issue that I would bring up is that we do have competing jurisdictions within our ANC, and that is we have our local neighborhood streets and public realm, but we also have our federal reservations and parks and triangles and circles. And so I think addressing the homeless issue we're going to need to build stronger relationships with our friends at the National Park Service to make sure that while we're addressing issues on our local streets and sidewalks, that we're not pushing those into our federal circles and triangle parks. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thanks. What I'm going to suggest is, given the hour, as I mentioned earlier, there's a question on an issue we really haven't talked about, and I think it's worth considering. Let's say everybody gets an hour to address this question and/or close.
An hour.
Then we'll wrap this up.
A minute.
A minute, 1 minute. So the question is, are you prepared to reach out to the PTA and families? The question came with respect to Ross, but obviously we have School Without Walls, we have Francis Stevens, and offer help. The parents obviously are going through, and the kids are going through a tough time during COVID with distance learning. And any thoughts you might have about reaching out to the PTAs and seeing what the ANC can do, what the ANC can advocate for. If you'd answer that question and give your concluding remarks. As I said earlier, we'll go in the reverse order of SMDs. So we'll start with 09, and why don't we start with Ed Hanlon? 1 minute. You got to unmute yourself, Ed.
I hope that doesn't cut into my 1 minute, Glenn.
No, but that does.
Okay. No, distance learning is a real problem, and it's difficult to know what to do until the pandemic ends, because children need to be in school. They need to socialize with other children. And so distance learning, no matter how hard one tries, is not necessarily effective or as effective on both a social learning level as well as an educational level. Now, with respect to something I'd like to say to my own constituents, I'm asking you to re-elect me as your ANC commissioner for another 2 years. I've worked very hard for you in the last 2 years. I've worked hard taking care of rodent control. God knows there's probably been no ANC commissioner in the city who's more concerned about rodent control and getting those trash cans fixed and replaced than I have been. I've worked on repairing sidewalks. I've worked on alley repaving. I've been discussing alley repaving of the alley behind Caroline Street with Brooke Pinto's office, and the alley between 14th and Swan and T with Brooke Pinto's office. I am determined, if I'm elected for another 2 years, to get those alleys repaved, to improve rodent control, to clean up our streets, repair our sidewalks, and everyone who knows me knows I work really hard at what I try to do, and I spend 20 hours a week trying to be your commissioner and get these things accomplished for you. And so I appreciate the opportunity I've had tonight. I thank Glenn and DCCA, and I ask you to vote for me in the November election. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Kyle?
Well, education is one of the top issues that I'm actually running on. We're actually in Garrison Elementary up here. All of the children who live in our 2B09 go to Garrison Elementary to start with. I've already met with Garrison's PTO and have been in conversations with them and have toured the school. My kids are hopefully going to be entering the DC school lotteries for the first time this fall. So education issues are a top priority for me. I think we should have a committee on education issues that works with all of the elementary schools, middle schools, and charter schools that have students that come from 2B. So I think it's definitely a high priority to also make sure they have the resources for virtual learning in the next year, and that we have an ongoing relationship as we try to solve future problems coming out of the pandemic and what could be coming down the road. Now, for my closing, I'd like to start off by saying, well, thank you, Glenn. And also thank the DCCA for hosting us tonight. With all of the chaos in the world, and unfortunately with a lot of chaos even in our own country, I think it's more than ever a time for us to return to some civility and transparency at all levels of government. And I think that should begin at the ANC level. So I think we can get through COVID if we're willing to all work together. I think we can reimagine 17th Street. I think we can move forward on the renovations at Stead Park and also the Reef Center if we're willing to all truly work together. I think we can actually untangle our traffic congestion issues and improve cycling safety and pedestrian safety if once again we're willing to be creative and work together. So I think more than ever, it's important that we have bridge builders on our ANC, and that's why I'm running, and that's why I'm asking for your support. So thank you to DCCA for hosting tonight. I appreciate you all giving us the forum.
Thanks. Matthew Holden?
Hopefully everyone can hear me this time.
Yeah, you're good.
Great. So I think the ANC should work to build relationships not only with the individual schools in our district, but the State Board of Education rep and the DC Public Charter School Board. I think those two bodies, you know, they do a lot in the city, but I don't have kids, so I don't always know what's going on with education. And I think that's the same with a lot of neighbors. So I think if the ANC could build relationships with the State Board of Education, that would be really helpful to spread information and advocate. So in my closing statement, I believe DuPont Circle is the best neighborhood in Washington, D.C., and we should do everything in our power to make sure that more people can benefit from our amenities. DuPont Circle is D.C.'s historical neighborhood, which provided a physical community to LGBTQ people when other places wouldn't. Because of this, it is especially important that we do not allow DuPont Circle to be an exclusionary community. To me, this means we should support more housing, more bike lanes, more sidewalks, more local businesses, and more public transportation. Everyone should feel welcome here, and I intend to spend my time on the ANC making sure that 2B is a positive, equitable forum serving the needs of all of our community members. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Silverstein?
Thank you, Glenn. First of all, I want to tell you that you are so much better than Chris Wallace. And
It's not saying much, but thank you.
A low bar, but you have clearly surpassed it. I've been involved for 7 years with Francis Stevens, and it is so important that we as a community reach out to our schools because there are so many people in those schools who are hurting. The school actually reached out to us to provide us with food from the Food Prints program, which they would normally be harvesting from their garden and serving to entire classrooms as part of their nutrition education and food preparation education. And being the kids aren't there, now that food is going to seniors in our neighborhood, some of whom are self-quarantining pretty much in order to stay away from COVID. So there, and many of these seniors want to give back to the school, somehow setting up a relationship between people who are old enough to be great grandparents and students in our neighborhood school. I want to thank you all for hosting this event. I do hope that our new ANC has a new birth of civility, which is desperately needed because our community is hurting, and we need to work together and not against one another. Thank you. Good night.
Okay, thank you, Mike. William?
Thank you so much, everyone, for this opportunity. I've enjoyed learning from my fellow candidates that are looking to dedicate their time to the neighborhood. When I think about, I love ending on this question about our youth, because that is the future of our community. Those that grow up here in DuPont Circle, they may stay here, they may go to other communities and take the lessons and experiences that they had here to other places across this country and the world. So the children and the youth are watching what we will do. And so what Mike just said in terms of our civility and how we lead going forward is critically important. And the choices in physical planning and social services that we provide is also critically important. While Atlanta may be my hometown, Washington, D.C. has become my heart town. And I've chosen to live my best life here in DuPont Circle, as attracted by our walkable streets, our to live a lifestyle car-free, But all of those good points also have a lot of challenges, and we brought up so many of those on our time together today. So I look forward to tackling the issues that we brought up. There's been so many great ideas. So regardless of which candidates make it to the finish line, I hope that you'll all stay involved, and I hope we can all champion the great conversations we've heard here today.
Thanks. Diane, you're next. Got to unmute.
Yes, thank you. I would love for the ANC to create an education committee of some kind and to establish a full program that's interfaces with the schools that are in our ANC. I think there are a lot of resources in the community. I know several teachers who are currently doing Zoom kind of assistance with learning and working with students. And I think that there's a group of other individuals that we have not tapped into that could act as mentors and to serve as tutors for our children. And in addition to the fact that I think that when my past work with organizations that provided resources for Parks and Rec and helped with renovation of playgrounds and those kinds of things, I think we could build the whole coalition around support for our schools and those who are in need. One of the things I say, if I'm elected to the ANC, I will be working to build those kinds of coalitions. I am very interested in education. I'm very interested in how we solve issues around persons who are unhoused. I've worked with, for nonprofits where I've worked with the mentally and developmentally disabled. I have worked with children's programs. I have worked with community outreach. I have worked through building coalitions and private sector and government. And I bring all of those experiences with me that I hope that I can contribute in a very serious fashion to this ANC and lend to our success as a community. I really believe in this community and I want to make as much contribution to it as I possibly can.
Thank you. Mo, I didn't forget you this time.
Thank you, Glenn. All is forgiven. Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Erica. Thank you, DCCA. Thank you also to the candidates. Really enjoyed hearing from you. That's been my favorite part of running. Is just hearing from more neighbors. To return though to the question though on education, while Margarita and I are currently not parents, we fondly refer to our futures. We're really excited to one day raise children in DuPont Circle, and part of that would be attending a local elementary school, whether it's Ross, Garrison, or Francis Stevens. And absolutely we need to do that sort of outreach to school organizations. I've had the chance to talk to Board of Education candidates both in Ward 2 and at large. And I want to continue those dialogues. Continuing that dialogue and being a bridge between government and the people is why I'm running for ANC to begin with. I'm not a national candidate, so there's no goofy short link, just my cell, which I just...
You just muted yourself.
Oh no.
You're okay, you're okay.
Well, I hope I can earn your vote even if I can't quite master Zoom.
Thanks, Mo. Yosef?
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. I am in support of supporting our schools. I just got engaged 2 months ago. In a year, I hope to get married, even if the pandemic is still going on. And also in a year, I hope to be walking around the area with my kids. So I'm in support. I want the best for our children, and I want to support every initiative that focuses on education. As for my closing statement, I want to say that obviously these are not ordinary times. The effects of the pandemic are still being felt. We have to be connected with concerned with health issues and with helping our neighbors secure home and livelihood as the economy splutters. Demonstrations concerning equal justice have corrected our priorities and focused us on changes we must make in our thinking and in our procedures. And then there is the overriding question of how to shape the necessary growth of our city at a time when demand for housing and transportation may be changing permanently or not. Today's ANC has to be flexible, not beholden to any particular interest, not tied to any rigid game plan. Today's ANC has to work with the neighbors, to listen, to encourage dialogue, to mediate when possible, and then act as the voice of the neighborhood. That can't be regarded as a part-time volunteer job. I will take it as a full-time job, commitment, and be there for every person in 2B03. Finally, I want to thank DCCA for this opportunity, my neighbors who have been talking to me and educating me about the issues and challenges facing 2B03, and last but not least, my fiance Bailey, who has been my biggest fan. I could not have asked for better campaign signs. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for the candidates. Thank you all for listening to me.
Okay, Robin, thank you. Robin, go ahead.
Good question, Glenn. As I mentioned, I am on the board of a Ward 2 school, and education is a priority for me. I have reached out and spoken to Dan Adler, the head of the PTA at Ross School, and Principal Holly Searle of Ross School. I solicited their views, and I've been working with Ross since day one. Ross is going through a renovation, and I've been hands-on with the renovation, both with the school, with the PTA, and with neighbors. I even spoke at the last ANC meeting about the addition of an ADA accessible elevator. This is a lot of need in the education community, and I've been working on that for years. This is not something that I want to do if I get elected. It's something I've been doing now. Thank you all for being here and all the friendly support I've received from the neighborhood. I know you all are here tonight because our country has come to a crossroads. Glenn and my co-panelists and I joked at the beginning of this about last night's debate, but in all seriousness, this is the most critical election of our lifetime, and you have to choose whether our society makes a U-turn or moves forward to a future that is great and prosperous. It's really up to all of us whether we change the existing political landscape of our country or not. Loads of issues divide us into small kind of contouring groups. COVID and current racial strife really hurts us. I'm a proud member of equality and bringing people together. I don't cut people off during neighborhood forums. I'm not pushing local issues off as simply national issues that can't be solved. I'm a proud Rainbow Caucus candidate and support all people of all walks of life. I'm not working for this neighborhood now. I'm working for this neighborhood now, and we need to focus on the common grounds that we all share and work together. These are issues that I'm making progress on, and I want to continue making progress on as your ANC commissioner. My number is 202-257-4896. That is my real number. I was the first candidate to pick up my petition, and I've always provided my contact information, and my email address is anc2b03@gmail.com. My website is robin4dc.com, and you can find me on Facebook at Robin for ANC. I want to hear your concerns and I want to address them. I look forward to seeing you all around the neighborhood, and please feel free to reach out to me, and don't forget to vote. Robin Nunn, ANC 2B03. Thank you.
Thanks. Daniel?
Hi. Thank you so much, Glenn and DCCA, for hosting this forum on education. As chair, I can't get involved in everything that's going on. Again, ANC is a part-time role, and I, like many others, have day jobs, and I really do appreciate the leadership of Commissioner Silverstein and Cunningham with the PTAs and education outreach, and tend to follow their lead when there's something for the ANC to say. Really appreciate this forum, and I look forward to continued partnership with DCCA as the Neighborhoods Citizen Association. Something I'm looking forward to over the next 2 years is a return of collegiality on the ANC, because I genuinely believe that we get better outcomes when we can really work together in good faith, even when we disagree. If you can't work together with your colleagues in good faith, you're not going to be successful. And when you're voting on a deliberative body, if you can't work with your colleagues, you can't get 5 votes to pass a resolution. And with an ANC, great weight is based off of the written documentation from a meeting. And if you can't get the votes, you're not going to be effective. So really appreciate the opportunity to work with everyone. I'm excited to hear so much great new energy on this panel, and look forward to working with all the new commissioners to get to work and have a great next 2 years.
Okay, thanks. Meg, your turn.
You're muted, Meg.
Thank you. Thanks to Glenn and to the DuPont Circle Citizens Association for this opportunity. I think we owe a debt of gratitude to those in our community who've served the ANC. I think we've learned tonight that it's a labor of love, but it's a tough assignment as well. On the issue of education, I'm a proud member of the Ward 2 Women's Alliance. We formed as a way to work across ANCs on issues particularly of concern to women, but also to advance the work of ANCs on shared concerns. And one of our members as a candidate for the Board of Election, I just want to give a shout out to our Sarah Morotra, who has been working on education issues for some time. I'm also a teacher, and I've been spending the past 8 months as a leader of a teaching initiative to help fellow teachers innovate and adapt to virtual teaching environments. So I absolutely agree and endorse the role that the ANC could play in supporting our various schools within our ANC as they do the same, and hope that we could also be a catalyst for involving the community in that support, because it's vital. As I've been out campaigning, I've heard from so many parents that are really struggling. It's very, very tough. And so we should be thinking creatively about ways to support them. In terms of closing statement, I've always lived in DuPont Circle in the time I've lived in DC. I love it. I love it because it has a proud history. It started as Millionaires Row and slaughterhouses, but it's where Frederick Douglass lived and where the Black Panthers got their start. We are the host of Capitol Pride. We have the city's first gay bookstore, which is amazing. We also have more think tanks probably than any other neighborhood in the country, if not the world. And somehow with all of that, we found a way to talk to each other about what matters and to safeguard what makes our neighborhood unique. And tonight we've talked about a lot of the crucial challenges that we're facing, urgent needs for housing in a pandemic and support to the small businesses that have made our neighborhood such a great place to live. And then making sure that proposed development reflects residents' informed consent and guidance as we adjust and adapt to the future. So I'm committed to ensuring that your voice and your concerns set our agenda and inform our decision-making. That's why I'm running. And I want to work with our ANC commissioners to do that and work across ANCs to collaborate on shared problems and challenges and find new ways to solve them. So I want to be your neighborhood voice for DuPont's future, and I hope you'll vote for me for ANC 2B01. Thank you.
Thanks, Meg. Matthew, you can bring us home.
Well, yeah, I opened, so I of course I have to be the one to close as well. So yes, thank you to DCCA. Thank you to Glenn, Carrie, and Erica, I believe, who is behind the screen right now. Yeah, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to share my thoughts and to get to know the other commissioners. I'd like to say that I'm very supportive of public schools. I really liked what William said about how children are the future. So what we're doing here is really, we're setting an example for those children. Over my first term as commissioner, I've really shown that, you know, I can work with other commissioners, I can work with constituents, and most importantly, you know, I can work with people who disagree with me. I am very transparent and open about my opinions. You know, again, like my campaign and my seat is really just trying to do anything I can to fight climate change. So if you meet me halfway, I will be willing to meet you halfway as well. And that goes out to constituents in my district. It goes out to the other commissioners on ANC 2B. Another thing is, you know, I'm proud to be one of 4 deaf commissioners in history, in DC's history. And, you know, that really like puts me in a special position because I really have to be careful, and I really cherish the opportunity to be a deaf commissioner. And so because I take my job very seriously, I really rely on feedback from my constituents. I rely on what people have to say to me about what's happening in the neighborhood. I'm always, you know, I'm all ears, I'm all eyes. So if you ever want to reach out to me, you can reach out to me on my website. You can, it's on my sign, matthew42b01.com. You can also email me at mhsampson1@gmail.com, and you can share anything you want with me. You can, well, not everything, but some things, you know, some opinions are good, you know. Yeah, and so thank you everyone again for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, well, let me add my thanks to all the candidates. In contrast to last night, I appreciate the level of discourse and the thoughtfulness of your comments. I also want to thank you for your willingness to serve. As was mentioned, this is a volunteer position, but the ANC does perform a critical role, and very much appreciate you all running, and appreciate you taking the time this evening. And to the members of the audience whose questions I didn't get to, apologies, but we've squeezed in over an extra half hour, so I think we've had a very fulsome discussion. As I mentioned earlier, we'll be looking to put this recording on our website in the next couple of days. And thank you and have a good evening. And as a couple of you said, if nothing else, go vote. I got my mail-in ballot today, so let's do this. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Glenn.
Yeah,
Night.
thank you, Erica.
everyone.
Thank you, Carrie.